There we go.
All right, we have just burnt literally 23 minutes of absolute fucking gold. So without further ado, let's begin with the actual recording. Jake Tuura, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
All good, man. All good. Yeah. So you are, is it Jacked Athlete on Instagram?
No, it's my name, Jake Tuura. My website's Jacked Athlete.
So I was going to say, whatever you are on Instagram, you're actually that big white guy that jumps really high. That's your niche.
Thank you.
What is your highest vert now?
Dude, well, I haven't tested in a long time, and it was weird. It was like at the time when I was testing all the time, my dunks were awful. Because I had just went from like bodybuilding and powerlifting to getting back into vertical jump training, which is like a lot of standing on the vertec testing, approach vertec testing. And when you take all that stuff and try to put it into dunking, like it's such a different skill. And I'm sure now my vertical is worse than it's been at my best vertical, but my dunking is the best it's ever been. So it's like, I've just taken away a lot of that plyometric type training or even testing vertical, and it's just dunk performance. That's all it is. And then as you get older, it's like I cannot handle the jump volume that I used to. I'm 30 now. I'm 30, but you take and I've had a lot of these pro dunkers on podcasts, and I'm still getting more on, and just to hear their stories, because there's so few people that are about dunking nowadays. It's getting more, but like Jordan Kilgannon had a story the other day, and his brother Chase goes in, does a dunk warm up. One of his dunk, he just throws down like this sick off the left leg dunk, and then Jordan's like, "That's his warm up, and here's my warm up." And Jordan goes up and he does like this 20-inch jump and barely gets a dunk in. Because dude, as you get older, it takes you so much longer, especially for jumping. I just feel like there's so much collision that you have to deal with. A lot of it through the anterior knee that you can't do what you did when you're a kid. And it sucks. It might take you 30 minutes, 40 minutes to warm up. Like for me, I have to play basketball to warm up, or I'm not going to have a good jump day. It's crazy. It kind of sucks to say, but that's just how it is as you get older.
Jake, trust me, like someone who's about to leave the 30s, it's the time in your life when you just let go. You stop saying like, I still have it. And you just put on the scale and say like, but is it worth it? You'll just get there. You're just not beginning, but this is the decade in which you make the transition.
Not yet. I feel I'm not going to say it yet.
You dodged it there. How many inches are we talking here? What was your vert?
Okay, my highest approach, my highest standing, I think was 35. I think I was weighing like 220. And then my highest approach was 39 and a half. I never hit a 40. It was 39 and a half. I was wearing Converse shoes. Maybe that was part of it. Who knows? Maybe I could have got a 40. You know what? Maybe someday I'll start testing more, and maybe someday I'll get a 40.
Well, if you get tested by some of these high school strength coaches that are putting out the stats for football, that would have been a 44.
Dude, okay.
I shit you not. I literally witnessed a kid where we were testing, and it was like, he was like 220, a sloppy 220, hit a 32. And we're like, oh, 32, good job. Nah, this is fucking bullshit. I'm a 36. And I'm like, are you sure? I was like, half an inch, I can believe it. He's like, nah, this is bullshit. And he went over to the head strength coach, hit a 36. He's like, see? And I'm like,
well, I do Vertec, and the thing with like the NFL Combine, right, is like to pull your scapula down. But I've never done that. I've always done like the most honest reach possible. Like I'm almost on my tippy toes reaching. People, dude, anyone, who cares, man? I got a 40, I got a this or that, and it's like if you're in the dunk world, it's just like who's asking what's your vert? It's like how cool are your dunks? That's what matters, you know?
Yeah. So what were the kind of like periods of your own training that helped you drive it up to that number? Because obviously I always think every strength coach goes from your NSCA essentials, then you read Poliquin, then you read Louis Simmons, then you go to like Olympic lifting, and then you go to the fuck it, none of this is working, then you like Verkhoshansky, and then just off the deep end.
Yeah. I think I'm a kind of a different story, because most of these dunkers or guys who jump high, you look at their past and they're just genetic. I mean, they're just they're good athletes, you know? And I hated sports my whole life until I was a senior in high school. I hated sports because I sucked. I was tiny. I was slow. Nothing athletic about me. And then senior year, I started lifting weights a little bit, doing vertical jump training. And then for the next maybe 3 years, I did vertical jump training, and I just got the worst patellar tendinopathy. I had it for like 3 years. And they just told me to rest. So I couldn't play basketball. I couldn't jump, nothing like that. Everything hurts. The rehab sucked so bad, which is why I put out so much content on rehab. But anyways, I just lifted, man. I took my squats for probably like 200 pounds, deadlifting probably 200 pounds. And then it's like deadlift gets up to 600, squat 500 pounds, and do hypertrophy training, no jumping whatsoever. And then I took all that I gained structurally, neurologically from getting stronger, producing outputs over time, and transfer it back into jumping. And that was my whole path, dude. It was just like do a lot of basketball, do a lot of jump training, get terrible knee pain, and then spend about 3-4 years just doing heavy lifting, develop structures, and then go back into jumping, which I wouldn't recommend anyone does. And no one's going to do it if they love jumping. You're going to take 3 years off of jumping. There's no way. But that's what I did. And I think people who have like really bad knee pain, there could be some lessons to take from that of like, maybe you need to stop that activity and spend a lot of time developing structures through like slow strength training. And then you can progress back into the jumping. But dude, I've always kind of went against what NSCA says, or even went against a lot of things that I've seen. So I don't think I have the traditional path. And then I also interned for Cal. So like after I interned with Cal Dietz, it's like I become Cal Junior and just does exactly what Cal does for 2 years. And then I critically think a little bit more of like, maybe I can't use expert opinion to justify everything. So yeah, it's been kind of a weird path. And now it's just, I do dunk sessions, I play basketball, and the lifting is the most basic stuff ever. It's like, I'm going to lift for like hypertrophy, or I'm going to lift for strength. And there's nothing at all that's special about it.
Any like loaded ballistic stuff? Because obviously you kind of work in like both extremes of that force velocity curve there. Anything in the middle?
No, I don't even know like loaded jumps. No. And if I guess this is me though. This is me at 30 years old. Just like I need to preserve myself to dunk. I need to keep my dunk performance there, which means I need to limit my jumping loads. I get a lot through basketball, change direction, excel, decel, jumping, landing. Not as much as when you're giving a max effort jump attempt. But it's like there's no point for me now. Like I don't need that general. That's like just general stuff. I don't need that general development. A lot of kids do. You know, they can do loaded jumps to see benefit to their vertical jump, or even plyometrics within a weight room setting, because I think they can handle it. And I think that's one distinction. Last time I had Jill Cook on, she was like, what you need to do, because you can never predict, everything is going to come up is patellofemoral pain or patellar tendon pain. Everyone who's a jumper, you're going to get it. It's just going to happen over time. And what she was like, she's like, there's nothing you can do to predict it. You never know. Someone can have the worst patellar tendon pathology in the world and never have pain their entire life. So there's no predictive measures. So what she says, what you basically need to do is take the people that have had tendinopathy before, put them in one group, take the people who have never had tendinopathy, put them in another group.
Yeah.
And then it's like the ones who've never had it, let them do whatever they want. The ones who have had it, manage their loads.
Interesting.
There's a strong link with what you're saying, as if you've trained like you've had experience when you train an older athlete, in which you just keep the load to the minimum because of low tolerance decreasing over time with age, but also because you get so good at your sport. That's the stimulus you need. Like you're not going to be, like you said, developmental loads or generating structure that's already there. So you want to be good at your sport at this end. All you need to do is just keep jumping and dunking. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And then it's like, dude, and then you do things to stay healthy if you need to do them. But there are guys like one guy I'm going to get on my podcast hopefully sometime soon. Anthony Height. He's like 5'6", and he throws down these crazy dunks. One reason I like him is because he has no penultimate step. It's like the babyest penultimate ever, which goes against everyone's these jump technique experts. But he doesn't train. He's never trained a day in his life. He doesn't lift weights. But
those are the people we hate.
Again, these are like outliers. So a kid who can't jump, they're not going to be like, well, Anthony Height doesn't train, so I don't need to train. Dude, he's a freaking outlier. You suck. Like he has never been in your situation ever in his life. You're a completely different case. But anyways, I think you could take from these guys and be like, he don't need to do it. Why would you put in more stuff that he doesn't need to do? how can you justify it? It's like
I'll come back. Sorry.
It's like in Anti-Fragile, he talked about you're at Anti-Fragile, Fernando? Yeah, so we had that section about the doctors of like, if someone has cancer, you need to do chemotherapy to get it out. Like there's a huge downside to not doing it. But if someone doesn't have it and it's like, let's do chemo on a healthy person, there's a huge downside to doing it. So it's like, if you take the genetic guy who never has knee pain ever in his life, has crazy good performance, are you really going to do an intervention on him when he might not need it? There could be a huge downside. You could injure him through training that he does not need. So it's like, where do you step in? How can you justify your intervention? I think that's what you need to ask first.
That's what we really like make the money, because that's ironic as S&C coaches, was you understand the principles over the method, because it's easy. Like, for example, say you learn as a practitioner, but never question anything. So you just go from a program to a program to a program. The program is generally fine. So, I mean, you're not really solving anything, you're just like copying and pasting, and it's kind of decent. It'll sort of work. So you won't produce anything unless, like, I know in America, the scouting is really good. So you got good talent, and no matter what you do, they're good. But if you want to be the sort of coach that can solve any problem, that's where you need to question stuff. It's like, why am I going to train everyone the same if everyone's different? But that takes time, knowledge, questioning is the whole process that probably takes people like us away from some sort of like standardized systems, right?
Yes. And I think one of the biggest frustrations I had, because I was college, I had like 110 athletes, something like that. Well, all different sports. So I guess it wasn't football, it was all different sports. But the thing, when you start to put in what an athlete subjectively likes or dislikes, and I tried to do a little bit of that, dude, it is impossible. And when you get to guys who are older, like 25
fucking coaches, Jesus.
Oh, wow. That's just a different subject. We're never going to end if we go there.
But I think when you get to those older athletes who know their bodies better, that pull to what they subjectively like and dislike, that has to become so much more important versus what it might mean for a 20-year-old kid who, and usually those 20-year-old kids, they're going to be feeling, their body's going to be feeling pretty good compared to how they're going to be feeling when they're 30.
And also they like what they're told to like or what their friends like. It's different when you're dealing with a guy that's 35 and it's like, well, actually, you probably know what works for your body.
Mm-hmm.
He's older than
you. Yeah.
So the reason I asked you about the Olympic lifting is obviously, again, I always think it's flipped particularly in North America, we say, Olympic lifters have the highest vertical jumps of any athletes, which is not true. They got that way because they did the Olympic lifts. And it's like, no, they're Olympic lifters because they're so explosive. And the hidden third variable is like the way their central nervous system is set up. And when you look at the best jumpers, say like, for example, volleyball, this is not like a traditional heavy weightlifting culture, but they do a ton of fucking jumps. That's why I asked you.
Yeah, that whole I've done like the USAW certification, and they bring that up of like the best vertical jumps, the most power output, and it's like, what does it mean for a sport? Take these Olympic lifters and have them jump in basketball and have them jump in volleyball. They're not going to be good jumpers. They can't run and jump. They can stand and jump. They can't run and jump. Well,
and also the power output studies done by Garhammer was to compare the second pull of a snatch and a back squat.
Yep. That was another thing. Shit. Yeah, that was another thing. Where it's like, just stand. Just go and stand there and jump, and you're going to beat out the second pull of the snatch.
So, I mean, you mentioned Joe Cook already. You've had your own knee pain. You've put out a lot of awesome content when it comes to knee pain, but you've also spoken about Keith Barr. And is it fair to say that the summary of these approaches is basically that Keith Barr is more of a structural approach? You're trying to put inputs into the tissue that change the structure, so you're not getting this short, stiff tendon. It's more compliant. Whereas Jill Cook is going to be more of a loading focused approach. Is that fair?
Well, I think I put out my jumpers knee protocol. I tried to fit the two together, tried to put their ideas.
How do you reconcile those two conflicts?
Yeah. I try to put them two together because it's like, and I think for myself, when I first got into the tendon stuff, because going back to my story was like, I just lifted for so long and then I got back into jumping. So I've developed all the structures, and then I come back into jumping, and I was jumping like I was jumping most days of the week, and I got patellar tendon pain again. My knee blew up again because you change loads too fast. You can develop all this structure. You can have the perfect biomechanics, the perfect structures in the world. If you go from 0 jumps to 100 jumps in a week, you're probably setting yourself up for some patellar tendinopathy because you can't change loads too fast. So I got into Keith Barr, and Keith Barr was just like, do isos, slow things down. It's viscoelastic. You'll hit the tendon more in a different manner. And I think that was the way that worked for me. But just like with pain, when you try something new, it often works. So it's like, it worked very well for me. Just doing iso lunges worked very well for me. And that was my own case study. But then it still come up. And that's where you got to get into the more understanding of the tendon, of how it reacts to changes in load. So the patellar tendinopathy paper, Jill Cook, Ebony Rio, Peter Malieris, Craig Purdom, all these people came together on this patellar tendinopathy paper. They laid out a 4-stage process. So like, if you have very bad patellar tendinopathy pain, let's say it's like more than a 3 out of 10, you need to cut out everything and just do isometrics. So you just do the isometrics, and you can do all the Keith Barr concepts to try to heal the tendon. And then you're also activating the quad, because the quad has definitely shut off when you have pain. When you have a tendon pain, the quad shuts off. So you need to get the quad active again. You can do the Keith Barr concepts to hit the tendon and try to structurally develop the bad areas. Whether that's happening or not, who knows? But then you can't just do Keith Barr and then be like, I'm good. You have to then progress into the isotonics, the little bit of lifting where the tendon is under that like slower type load, but it's not holding the position. It's going down and up through the position.
Do you think is that kind of like nervous system re-education? Because like you mentioned inhibition, like using of isometrics to get like an analgesic effect. If you're using isometrics, you're still activating that tissue, but maybe not moving in a way that's painful.
How much of it is just the nervous system, you're saying?
How much of it is not necessarily the structure, but convincing the brain that, hey, you can do this?
So that's definitely going on because a lot of the Keith Barr content is just, you're talking about you're focusing in on the knee and looking at the structure. But as we say, pain, you can have pathology and have no pain.
It's the brain that's stopping you.
Yeah. We can't explain pain by just saying, well, you got a hole in your tendon and we need to heal the hole. And that's why Jill Cook comes in, and Ebony, all of them say, you can have a hole in your tendon and never have pain in your life. So who cares? So they're like, who cares about the hole? Yeah, who cares about the hole? So their whole process, which I think you can put the two together, because you can heal the hole if you do regular isometrics, but you also need to progress back into sports. You can do the slow, heavy stuff. Then it needs to be a little bit faster, heavy stuff. And then you can slowly progress the loads back into sport, because it's just working like two far extremes. You have the isometric side, and then you have the jumping side. And where do you bridge the gap? And you need to bridge the gap with heavy strength training up and down, and then doing jumping at a lower intensity. And that gets you back to the dunking. But if you just do the dunking and just do the heavy isometrics, you're working the far extremes. And I think you need to do something to bridge the gap. But we're talking about pain, and individual responses to pain can be so crazy that it's like, if someone has patellar tendinopathy and I say, get on a leg extension and do that, that might be all they need, and they're good for the rest of their life. And if someone else might do that, and their tendon might blow up, and then it might come. I've had cases like that where like, you think a tendon will respond well to a heavy isometric. Some people don't. Some people are like, my tendon blew up and I couldn't do anything for 3 days. So then it's like, okay, drop the load a little bit, try maybe more extended position, and now their tendon feels better. And then they slowly progress from there. That is what is so difficult, and probably for the last year has just like ruined my brain trying to figure this out, because it's like the pain responses are so individual, but you have to account for everything, and they're going to be individual. But having the objective starting point, of educating on rest is not good. You need to load the area. It is about the brain. It is about the structure. And let's think of a good plan going through to progress you back into dunking, which is going to be isometric, isotonic, the like lower level plyometric back into the higher level plyometric. But again, find what you're missing. Some people never touched a weight in their life. All they might need is to do a freaking goblet squat and get their goblet squat up to 100 pounds for 10 reps or something. That might be it. And as I'm just like, dude, do what you think is missing, relieve your pain, and forget about it. Like, be done with patellar tendinopathy. It is not a fun thing to have. You want to dunk basketballs. So do whatever you think is missing, that's missing. Can I go, my case we were talking about earlier, like my patellofemoral pain, which I think was kind of mixed with patellar tendinopathy. That's one thing Jill said, you can't have both at the same time. And I'm like, dude, there are so many cases where I think both are existing, patellar tendon and patellofemoral. And for myself, I'm
just
talking
going
about
to
what
the difference for people that are not familiar with your stuff.
Yeah, so a patellar tendinopathy will be pain right underneath the kneecap, right in that one spot. And we can pretty much lump this together. Pain right there is going to be pretty much the same as Osgood Schlatter, which is pain right at the tibial tuberosity. And it's going to be very similar to quad
like
tendinopathy.
Wide, right?
Sorry, what's that?
So it's like 2 fingers wide. It's like super focused.
Yes, it has to be a very small area. So like the tendon pain is going to be right under the kneecap. It's going to be right at the tibial tuberosity, or it's going to be the quad tendon, which is right at the top of the kneecap. That's going to be where you get the tendon pains. You're not going to have the tendon pain in the middle of the tendons because it's just not weak there. That's not where it's going to get the structural disruptions. It's going to be at those like the points where it has to connect to something. So you have a tendon pain there. It's going to be very focal. There are many things. It's like you might get patellar tendon pain sitting in a car, like crazy patellar tendon pain if you have very bad tendon pain, but usually it's going to be load related. So if you do a heavy strength exercise, it shouldn't hurt your tendon if you have a tendon issue.
Rapid loading, right?
Yeah, it's going to be the rapid loading. So it's going to be jumping. It's going to be cutting, changing direction. That's going to be just kill your tendon. You're going to feel it right in the tendon. But the cool thing is it warms up. If you have a tendon issue, it's going to warm up with activity. If you take 10, 20, 30 minutes to warm up, you can get to the point where you no longer have tendon pain and do your dynamic activity. But the next day it's going to blow up. It's going to just feel awful in the morning or the next 24 hours. If you have patellofemoral pain, that's just general knee pain. It could jump all around the kneecap, anywhere in the front of the knee. And that probably is not going to warm up with activity. It's going to hurt at random times. It might hurt just like doing anything, like laying there on the couch, it might hurt. Sitting there watching TV, it might hurt, which kind of goes with the tendon because a tendon can hurt if you're sitting in a car. So that's one thing that is similar. But it's a dull pain. Patellofemoral is just this dull pain around the knee. A tendon pain is a sharp pain. And it's very focal. Patellofemoral is just wide. Now, Dill says you can't have both because they're completely different loads that provoke it. Like a patellofemoral pain, it could hurt when you're squatting. Any loaded deep knee flexion, it's probably going to hurt. Loaded deep knee flexion that's slow, it's probably not going to hurt a patellar tendon. So I think you can have both because I've had both. Like they just come and go. One day patellofemoral, the next day patellar tendon. And when we go back to what you're missing, like what I think I was missing, I'm a strong dude. I squat a lot of weight. I split squat a lot of weights. I do heavy isometrics all the time. I went out to California and I was no longer playing basketball. Like my ankles had no elastic volume. I could have been playing basketball for 3 to 4 hours a week. I was doing nothing at all. I was just lifting heavy and dunking, and I had patellofemoral pain. I would have patellar tendon pain. And then I went to Minneapolis for the summer, play basketball 3, 4 hours, 5 hours a week, patellofemoral, patellar tendon pain, way better. So it's like, what are you missing? What are you missing as an athlete? Are you not getting any elastic volume, low level plyometric contacts, but you're doing everything else that you think you need to be doing? Try adding that in and you might feel better. But then you have the usual people that get knee pain, patellofemoral pain, patellar tendon pain. They're the basketball athletes who get a ton of elastic volume because they're playing basketball every freaking day and they never touch weights. So get them to touch weights. So it's like figuring out what a person needs to do because there's always going to be something obvious they're missing. Figure out what is the obvious thing they're missing, add it in, see if the pain is better.
I'll tell you something that's interesting. I was talking to TK because he's just started in basketball at Amherst. And, historically, Alvin Miller put out, well, we're going to train what the sport doesn't stimulate. They're jumping all day long. We don't do plyos. So they were very kind of like traditional strength training, ballistic power training focused in the gym, and they wouldn't do plyometrics. And his reply, kind of like what you said, it's a lot of extensive elastic volume. But if you look at the vast majority of what they do, it's these like small knee bends, not maximal, not fast, just getting shots off and moving around, or like trying to get rebounds. If you look at the actual true maximal jumping efforts in basketball, unless you are a specialist dunker or it's a specific practice, there's not actually a ton of that in basketball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly another thing you'll see with basketball players is like they play basketball their entire life, and then you have them go and do a dunk attempt and it freaking blows up their knee. They're like, oh, I feel my patellar tendon. Oh my God. And it's like, they don't have any volume of max effort jump attempts. They have no capacity for it. So if they want to dunk, you got to put that in somehow. You got it. And that's a load that you have to keep consistent over time. It depends on the style of basketball, because some people will play basketball and they can get a max effort jump attempt here and there. but it's not like doing an isolated dunk session where you're jumping as high as you physically can. So that's another thing that you might need to fit in too, is like, if you want to jump as high as possible, you have to keep those loads in throughout the weeks.
Yeah. It's like sprint efforts in field sports. It's like, do you actually do that much in the context of your sport and position?
Well, it would be easy to understand if we put simplified into a barbell and you always lifted at 60% and one day you just attempted 100% max out of nowhere. You've never gone over 60. Like for us, it wouldn't make sense. But if you translate the same principle, the heuristics, everything is just run for us by heuristics, then you just apply to each and every individual case or a group case. But you have to have those rules of thumbs to understand the framework. And then you'd be like, oh, maybe this is not what we think we're doing, and maybe this doesn't apply. But in general, everyone has to do, heavy load, quick loading, short, sharp, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yes. And again, I would apply this to a person that has pain. If they don't have pain and their performance is fine, there's no check boxes you have to have. There's nothing like that, because why do we need to intervene? You're fine. Go and do what you're doing. But once you get pain with jumping and you want to jump high or something, then we need to start looking at, okay, what are you missing through your training? What could you possibly be missing? Let's add it in. But if you're fine, you're dunking. Like if I take a pro dunker and he feels completely fine, never had knee pain in his life, throwing down sick dunks, who am I to step in and say, yo, you really got to be putting in some heavy isometrics. What is wrong with you? How can I say that?
You would be Gota telling someone that they've been doing it, someone at the elite level, they've been doing it wrong their whole life.
Yeah.
That's my medal cabinet, bitch.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think currently today, that's what we have to say. Maybe in a few years from now, we'll have better predictive measures so we can actually add in some things to be more preventative. But currently today, what can you do that's preventative? Who freaking knows?
One thing about Keith Barr that I found interesting in your podcast with him is looking at, that relationship or the difference in stiffness between muscle tissue and tendon tissue. And I think he put out this crazy stat about the number of hamstring pulls that you have in female sprinters versus male sprinters, because they have more compliant tendons because of estrogen and stuff like that. There's that relationship. Do you think hypertrophy is a way to modulate the relative stiffness between those two structures in jumpers? Or is it hypertrophy benefits jumping and pain for other reasons?
Okay, so if we talk jumping, patellar tendon pain, females never going to get patellar tendon pain. It is so rare that a female gets it. And we could say that it is that reason, that it's just less explosive, they have more compliant tendons. So if we talked about jumping, they would be more likely to get like a muscle pull than they would get a patellar tendinopathy. But one thing that makes it very confusing with patellar tendinopathy is the research on I think it's peak height velocity of like the puberty, the time frames of puberty. And females, for this reason, females are more protected against patellar tendinopathy because they hit puberty earlier. Yeah, they hit it earlier, they're done. Versus guys are still going through puberty, and coaches are starting to destroy them with sporting loads.
I'm 36, still waiting for puberty.
So at the time, so the idea is, at the time that the female's patellar tendon is developing, they're not getting overloaded with sport. But the boys, at the time their patellar tendon is developing, they are getting overloaded with sport. So that's what could be causing the pathology. And if you have pathology already existing in the tendon, that's a risk factor for pain in the future. So that's one reason why it could be happening. As far as like someone who's older, I think, I think definitely if you want to talk about something that would potentially reduce the likelihood of a patellar tendinopathy, you should be doing strength training. I'm not going to use the word preventative, because like there's nothing you can do to predict it. Yeah. So I think if you're interested in jumping as high as you physically can, I think that would just be a safeguard to say, let's do some knee dominant strength training exercises to work the other end, because you're getting this crazy tendon demand, and what connects to the tendon is the quadriceps. So let's do something to develop the quadriceps.
That point you just made there, I would be interested to see the relative rates of tendinopathy in early versus late specialization sports then. Yeah.
You know what? That's one thing that I would like to see, and there's probably about 1,000 other things I'd like to see, but there's no research that's done on it.
how much, I'm just going to completely change directions. How much do you feel that hypertrophy is just volume driven? Because I feel like strength is intensity driven. If you just find a way to lift with the highest percentage of 1RM for the highest volume that you can without breaking, you're going to be the strongest. And I feel like hypertrophy is just find a way to do the highest volume that you can without breaking each week above a certain threshold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, I hardly ever look at hypertrophy. Currently, I only look at patellar tendon because that's all that I'm really interested in is.
And you're also like 220, 230.
215, 220.
You leaned up.
I need, if I cut weight, if I get down to like 205, something, I'll just be jumping so high. But the thing is, when you train hypertrophy, it gives you appetite. You want to eat, like I'm freaking starved. If you do a hypertrophy workout, you're starving, you want to eat, and it's hard to like, not eat, I guess. So, hypertrophy. I like the way that, Mike Israetel, like long time ago, had this podcast. He was like, if it was all about volume, then distance runners would be huge because they get crazy volumes of foot contacts, they're running
caveat of like above a certain percentage of 1RM.
Yeah, so exactly, the intensity has to be high enough, and where I usually set it at is like, I don't know, 65-70%. If you're around there and you're taking your sets, one of the concepts was like the reps in reserve concept of like, if a set is not within 5 reps in reserve, it's probably not going to be a good set to signal hypertrophy. Whether that's true or not, there's so many people that debate it. I think it's kind of a good thing to say that your sets should be difficult. And yes, I would agree though. As long as the intensity is high enough, you need to get a high volume. Assuming that you can recover from that, which there's a lot of variables that go into that. Yeah. But assuming you can recover from that, and I think the best way to see that is that you're hitting PRs, like rep PRs in the weight room, and you're gaining weight, and it's not just like fat weight, but meaning like you're sleeping well, you're recovering everything. So I think those are just ways you have to track it. But I think in the weight room, yeah, your intensity needs to be high enough, which is if you're lifting at like 40% load, I don't think that's high enough. And how long you're going to do a set of 50 reps, you can do a set of 50 reps, take it to failure. That's going to signal hypertrophy. But why don't we do more sets by doing higher intensity, do higher intensity.
If there was only a program out there of a guy putting up hypertrophy clusters, if
I know exactly,
thing, I think people should go for it.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I would recommend for like an athlete, because if you are taking your sets as close to failure as possible and doing like a squat or a deadlift or a split squat, and you're just absolutely killing yourself in the weight room with that stuff, how well are you going to perform if you're playing a sport? How well are you going to perform if you need some explosive measure? So it's like the cluster is just doing half of the reps, twice the sets, cutting on the rest periods. That's a way to get the volume, keep the intensity very high, but hopefully maintain your explosive athletic abilities.
That's one of the things. Like I feel like one of the things that unites a lot of successful programs is just like with the hypertrophy clusters, it's like you're probably pushing up the volume higher than most people can handle. Because if you're doing like 8 sets of 5, there's not a lot of people that do like 5 sets of 8 on most main exercises, and you're structuring it in such a way that you can hit those volumes without being as tired. I always thought like one of the reasons why the Bulgarians train so many sessions per day, one was to keep the athletes out of trouble apparently, and 2, it's just like if you reduce the session length by 50%, but you do 200% more sessions, that's more volume per week. It's just trying to find these clever ways to sneak in more volume without it being unproductive.
Yeah. And and if we talk like hypertrophy, it's like you can, if we talk about isolation exercises, do your isolation exercises, freaking kill yourself. Who cares? Like the global impact that has on your body is so minor.
It's like if you're doing rather than a systemic fatigue.
Yeah. And those get hypertrophy. So it's like if you want to do freaking bicep session and destroy yourself, go ahead. But if you want to do like a squat session and destroy yourself, you're gonna have to pay for that for maybe a few days and maybe a few weeks. So that's where an approach like an isolation approach could work well if you just want to destroy yourself with that stuff. But I think if you talk about an athlete who needs to improve the just general outputs because they jump like 20 inches or something like that, I don't think you need to be spending your time on isolation exercises. I think you need to do stuff that is demanding forcefully on your system So train at a higher intensity.
Talk to me about jumping, because obviously, you know, the tendinopathy, the hypertrophy, you've said it all comes down to you wanting to jump higher. But there are many things that you have put out and agreed with that actually go against mainstream thought when it comes to jumping. What would you say some of those things that, you know, oh, this is dangerous, or this is what you need to do, grossly overrated? For example, snap downs and valgus.
Okay, yeah. Snap downs is, I guess, what are you doing snap downs for? For standing jump technique or something? You don't have to do that. Like, if some people jump more hip dominant, some people jump more knee dominant. I think just leave it alone. You know, that's what the body wants.
Knee dominant though.
It would be tough to say, because it's like in a standing jump, and it's like you'll see both. You'll see people with a crazy like bend at the waist. You'll see people with not much bend at the waist, use the knees, and I think that's just something you leave alone. Again, if we're using it to predict injuries, you can't predict injuries. It's impossible to do. So I think if we want to take an athlete who's 18 years old and they jump with a knee dominant strategy, they've been doing that for 18 years. Who are you to tell them that we need to start jumping with more hips? How do you know that? Now, if a case where maybe they have patellar tendon pain and they jump with just the hips because their body has went to avoiding the knees, that might be something you want to train back into them. So maybe doing a variety of jumps so that they can get used to loading the knees a little bit more. But yeah, snap downs, using it to like for jump technique or landing technique, technique in general with jumping is going to be so different. And you don't need to work on it. And if you watch any NBA guys land from a jump, they're never landing in a snap down. You know, they're landing,
bouncing and rolling.
Yes. And that's the thing with collisions. I just had I'm putting a podcast out with my friend Nick Cazone at Physical Fusion in Chicago. He trains a lot of basketball guys, and he has cases where he'll have guys jump on the jump mat. And you know how you land on a jump mat, stiff legs, you know, it'll bring out knee pain. This crazy high collision, and guys, they do 3 jumps on it, their knees hurt. So it's like, if you let them land how they want to, so he'll take them and just do them on a vertex. So if you do a vertex, you can land however you want. You land in a way where you just delay the collision. You make it a little bit longer. It's a little bit easier on the knees. So if we do something like a snap down, you go down, or hold the position. Like, why do you need to train in that way to like stick a collision and shorten as much as possible? If you watch any NBA guy land, they're always trying to extend the collision by their butt touches their ankles, or they fall on their back, you know, or something crazy happens when they're trying to extend the collision. That's just something.
Johannes Vetter, when he throws all of his best throws, he puts this crazy force into his blocking leg because he has to like launch the javelin as far as possible. But then the next step after that, he always falls flat on his belly. But second best javelin throw of all time.
Yeah. So, dude, the thing Darian Barr says is like, it's built in. Deceleration is built in. The body knows how to do it. So we don't have to train for it. And then if you say you're afraid of injuries, like, come on, we can't predict them. Maybe that's just something we leave alone. And then what was the second part about jump that you had? Snap downs and valgus. Oh yeah. Valgus. So let's separate someone who's like completely healthy. And you see, I guess, dude, if you see this like crazy, like uncontrolled valgus, like knees are touching, I think it's on the coach to be like, okay, that might be a little bit dangerous.
I think we need to distinguish between bilateral valgus and unilateral valgus.
Yeah. So and this is a case where like females going to get more ACL tears. One of the reasons they propose is a Q angle, you know, hips are wider, knees come in a little bit. So if you make some females land, like jump off a box, land and you just see this crazy knee cave, that might be a case where you're going to be like 2 leg or 1 leg, you know. Maybe that's a case where like, okay, let's strengthen your hips. Let's strength train so that you have a little bit more control around your knee. That can come from strength training the hips, RDL, split squat, stuff like that. And then they could have ankle. You could be looking at the ankle. Maybe they need some elastic volume for the ankles. Maybe they need some strength training for the ankles. Just develop those areas. And then over time, you need the landing to be unconscious. You need it to happen automatically. So if they're landing with this crazy knee valgus, and you probably can see females that have such wide hips and they have such lack of control that it's like, you might hurt yourself down the line, you know, because that's just bad. You're going to see it as you get younger and younger athletes. You're going to see some pretty bad looking type jumps. Is that going to lead to an ACL? Who knows? But general strength training, general physical preparation is probably going to be the best. Now, often, I think we were talking off air, often you'll see like those valgus positions but it's like the next leg is coming down to manage the collision, because it's like you don't want to land in this valgus, which would be like uncontrolled, knees coming in. You don't really want to do that. But if you ever see a case like that, the other leg is coming down soon to take that, you know? So if we talk about ACL tears, I think it's just going to be a freak accident often. An athlete lands like that, freak accident, for some reason, their other leg did not get down in time. Yeah. Or they get hit in air or something like that happens. A million variables to injuries like that. I want to say this. When I got to Youngstown, I started training women's basketball, and the athletic trainer, he was telling me about the year prior, they had a girl, she was, I don't know if she was a junior, senior. She came in, did a jump stop, and she tore both ACLs in a jump stop. And he was like, I have never seen that before in my life. And I mean, she had been training for quite a long time. Their strength coach was an intelligent guy, but what do you do for that? And what could you argue? I don't know. Overload, too much work done.
Who
freaking knows?
I was talking to a guy over the weekend, earlier this week, and he said that if you look at how much force is actually required to rupture an ACL, it's incredibly low. If you look at the timeframes associated with an ACL, I think it's the first 30 milliseconds of ground contact. So it's not under conscious control. Then if you look at the sheer amount of variability in human movement, at some point, if it's all equally likely to happen, you're going to land in that position and create the ideal conditions for an ACL tear. And then you look at the sheer numbers of people taking part in sport. It's like, it's going to happen. It's just like, how can you create these minor tweaks and the different variables to manage that risk?
Yep. And it's just a guess. You just guess. As a strength coach, you just guess. Let's do, what do we think is wise physical preparation and load management? And let's do that. And then individually,
how do you be less wrong as opposed to right?
I think you err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
You know,
well, I think that's kind of like the question I ask myself now, which is, if you look at the domain in which we operate in the complex domain, not the complicated, which means there isn't a right answer, which means your best hope is to be less wrong, is to probe and experiment and be, okay, fucked up on that, cut that out a little bit, and just keep iterating in that fashion.
Yeah, that I opened up Anti-Fragiles to look at some of the notes I had, and he was talking about using something simple to explain something complex. Like, I mean, using an analogy from something simple, like a car in a human being as a car. A car is a pretty simple thing compared to a human being. And now we're going to say this is Robert Griffin, RG3's ACL tear is because he had a lot of acceleration and no brakes. Yeah. It's like, come on. Yeah. Are you serious?
And here's the thing. It would be very, very, very peculiar if a highly complex problem from a dynamic system had a simple, elegant cure. You think about the examples from human history where, here's this thing, it's just solved all your problems. It's like, what? Penicillin. That's like the only one I can think of off the top of my head. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, to finish up, where can people find you and get a hold of your stuff?
My website's Jacked Athlete. My Instagram's where I post mostly everything Jake Tuura. I put out a lot of YouTube videos now, probably like 50 on patellar tendinopathy, which is for the probably like 0.001% of the population who actually cares about it. But if you do care about it, it sucks. It's a terrible injury because the one thing you love doing is jumping, and you can't jump because jumping hurts your knees.
People will pay a lot of money to get out of it.
Yes. So yeah, I'm working on updates too, because I put a lot of science into it, put a lot of concepts. I've learned so much over the last year, and a lot of kids who have it are just freaking dumb as a rock. So it's like, what exactly do I do? It's like, I told you what to do, but apparently you have no creative ability to, or you just don't train. I mean, who knows? So it's like giving better solutions, but not dumbing it down so far to be like, here are the standards you have to hit, or here are the check boxes you have to hit, because I mean, those just cannot exist.
You can say knees over toes out loud. You can say that.
Yeah, that's where to find me. And I more on the jump world thing, like, dude, people, the high box jumps, you know, or I feel like in the jump world, these people that are critical of these jumping athletes, like, do you train jumping athletes? Because the way I look at them, like Christian Thibodeau's neurotyping system, like the explosive neurotype, are just going to be the jumping athletes. Like, maybe defensive backs or wide receivers or just basketball players,
Twitches.
is they suck. Well, yeah, they suck to train. They're a headache to train in a weight room setting. So when you give them things that are just boring and low stimulus, they're not going to engage in it. So if you give them a 12-inch box jump and tell them to land with straight legs, that's boring. Give them a 60-inch box jump, they're going to eat it up. They might injure themselves, but they love it. And even all the rehab stuff, like if we take a basketball player who has any type of injury and you give them rehab stuff that is very low stimulus, boring, is it really going to work? Like we need to do something that stimulates their brain, maybe their visual system, their vestibular system, gets everything on board, because that's what they're used to. That's what they do in sports. And I think that's one part that's missing, is we focus so much on this graded exposure of the tissue, but when they get into the sport, everything is involved. It is so high stimulus. So how can we put that into a rehab setting? And going back to give an example, my case, I did all this biomechanical for my patellofemoral pain, all this biomechanical stuff, breathing drills, like do something, walk down and back, see if my gait pattern had changed. And for myself, all I needed to do was play basketball 3 times a week.
Dude, if I was doing an ACL rehab, I would spend most of my time at the trampoline park, on the wrestling mats, and on the field. And this much.
Yeah.
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 All right. Let's wind it up. That was awesome, man. Thank you.